Hey guys, it's Rebecca. So, I'm having some camera problems. I'm pretty sure I broke my pivot. If so, this is the second time, and I'm really gentle with my equipment, so I'm starting to beginning to believe that it's actually pivot, not me. Anyhow, so whenever I'm happen to talk to you today, I'm going to talk to you directly here. I think I have the camera set up so that you'll see me if I'm working down this end of the arena, but it's not going to follow me as it usually does. So I apologize for that. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about position on the horse, and especially in the sitting trot. So I don't have the best position. There's plenty of people out there that have better positions than me, but it is something that I work on a regular basis. And so I think there's a couple tips that I can share with you that would be really helpful for you. I think one of the first ones we can talk about is understanding your own body. So I am, number one, I'm an easy keeper. I don't eat much and I don't stay skinny, unfortunately. I don't have the typical dressage body that looks really good on a horse. In particular, this big horse, unfortunately, like his widest part is that like the most difficult part to have a good position on, just because I'm small and he's big. Be really helpful if my legs were longer. But despite having said all that, there is definitely an understanding of my body and my body biomechanics that I think would be really helpful for you to understand your own. And so I'll talk about myself because I think that will help you a little bit in figuring out your own body. So one of the things that's always super helpful is to take measurements. So measure from your heel to your knee and your knee to your hip, from your hip to your waist, and from your waist to your shoulder. And if you think you have an exceptionally long neck, you could actually do some measurements from, up to the top of your head. But what you'll find is these dimensions are really important. So the ideal dressage body as far as look, and I think as far as being able to organize yourself, would be to have longer thighs than calves, to not be long-waisted or long in the upper body, but to have like a longer lower body and a shorter upper body. It just helps you organize your body better. And obviously the people that I think look the prettiest, right? If you're just talking about like looks only, not functionality, are people that have long, thin legs and long thighs and a shorter upper body. So I don't have any of them. I am actually equidistant from my heel to my knee as I am to my knee to my thigh, which actually puts me in a weird category because that is actually unusual. Most people will have longer thighs just naturally. Please stop. Please stop. And so with that, I have to be really careful. Like this saddle has fairly big knee rolls, but I don't really hit them because the worst thing for me would be to hit the knee roll like right here. And with a shorter thigh, that's something I had to be careful with. People, if I get in other people's saddles and they have a longer thigh and their knees down here, then I come in and I'm going to hit their thigh block in a weird position. It's going to block my hips. So the other thing about me, let me sit up tall, is that I'm actually equidistant between my hip and my shoulder as I am my hip to my heel, which is not ideal either, because that makes me a little bit, I don't want to say top heavy, but I definitely can influence the horse a lot if I start to get unbalanced up top. So if I lean back a little bit or I lean forward a little bit, I have more leverage than someone who had a shorter upper body than me. So I have to really keep that in mind as I'm riding, right? So I have always done better if I try and stay exactly vertical, which you're supposed to anyhow, but there is some instructors out there that try and encourage you to do different things to get a feel, and they have never worked for me because of my longer upper body. So of course, I have a fairly large melon, but my neck is sort of like normal. So I don't really, besides just having a conscious effort, a conscious habit of looking down, there is no anatomical reason for my neck to do that. It's just, my bad positioning. So obviously everybody's heard, the heel, hip, shoulder alignment. And in this horse, sometimes I find my leg kind of going a little bit forward. That is a conscious thing that I have to think about all the time, to be actually like kneeling a little bit. And I know part of it is because his widest spot is right here. It's right there. And that actually is a weird spot. If I ride horses that are a little bit smaller, the widest spot is here, like at my knee, which is kind of like your most flexible, like being able to wrap your legs around. So sometimes I don't feel like I can wrap my legs around this horse because he's so big. But whatever. I enjoy riding him, so it doesn't matter. Okay, with that being said, then I want to say about the position. So you stack all these pieces up. I'm really into core engagement. I don't know. I have a jacket on and then I have a sweater on underneath. You have to be careful that you're not lengthening your front body and arching your back. That would be a shortened, so we're talking about the length between like the pubic bone and the top of my sternum versus the length of the bottom of my sacrum up to the bottom of my neck, the base of my neck, right? And you want them to be even on both sides. So this would be a shorter front side, this would be a shorter back side. Does that make sense? So you want to, and the only way that you're really going to be able to do that is with core engagement. But I will say that I've struggled a lot with people wanting me to, because I have a booty, okay, I get junk in my trunk, and I get it from like here to here. Whenever I gain weight, that's where I gain it first. That's where I lose it last, unfortunately. But sometimes people see the junk in my trunk and then they think that I have an arch in my back, and I don't. So I've been encouraged over the years to really round my back to get the arch out. But unfortunately, with my anatomy, that is actually putting me in a C curve this way and is actually shortening my front end. So it's really important to have the core engagement, because I don't want to arch my back. I don't want to collapse. What I need to be able to do is engage here to keep my spine aligned, right? I'm not trying to get the S curve out of my spine. I'm trying to stabilize it in that S curve. And then I'm going to sort of like, Mary Wanless calls it like push into the wind here. It's not that I'm leaning forward, but it's like I'm not doing this where I'm arching my back and sort of pushing out my sternum, because I don't want to have this positioning, right? That's going to then take all the S curve out of my neck and going to cause me to have neck issues. But I don't want to collapse here in the sternum either. So that's where she is like, so if I gauge my core and I'm kind of like just slightly thinking of pushing into the wind a little bit as I'm moving forward, that keeps me nice and aligned. Okay. And then my thing is like, oh, I'll have all that and then I'll look down and ruin it all. But anyhow, so that's just sort of like the general, like how to align your body on the horse. When it comes to sitting the trot, you'll kind of see two scenarios. You'll see one where people will bounce a lot, and that's usually because they're too tight. And then you'll have the people that wiggle a lot, and that's because they're too loose. And what is so hard about sitting the trot is that there's some spots that have to be very flexible, and there's some spots that have to be very engaged, right? And so if you're engaging the wrong things, or if you're too flexible in the wrong things, then that's what creates this extraneous movement. So let me get a little trot going here. And I'm just going to go really slow because I want to just be able to concentrate on my position. So I'm just going to have him just kind of go under tempo a little bit, okay? And what I want to concentrate on is this part right here. I'm not just loosey-goose there. I do have my legs wrapped like around him. I do have this internal rotation of my thigh, but I am not tightening up my hip flexors. It's really important that the hip flexors are able to open and close as you sit the trot, because otherwise that's where you need to absorb the trot. If you absorb it anyplace else, it's going to be if you absorb it in your back, it's going to hurt your back and it's going to have too much wiggle. If you absorb it in your head and neck or in your legs, then there's going to have too much wiggle there, okay? So what we want to do is, so I'm going to engage my core, I'm going to line all my pieces up, and then the part that gets to move the most is my hip flexors, okay? So that, and he will get a little softer to sit as we warm up a little bit more. If I wiggle my midsection, I'm going to start to get this going on, and my neck kind of gets in it, and my hands get sloppy. You see how my hands got sloppy in that? If I'm wiggling my midsection, my hands bounce. The way I stabilize my hands is by stabilizing my midsection, and I'm going up and forward. So I feel like something is pulling me up through the top of my head, and then I'm allowing the horse to carry me forward. So it's not just up and down, it's up and forward. And that's where the hip flexors have to be able to move, so that you're not just going up and down, but you're going up and down and forward, okay? And being able to control the speed of your hip flexors and the amount that you allow them to move actually helps control the tempo and the how much your horse moves forward. So part of the reason that I was able to keep him slow is because I picked the rhythm. So it's like I'm bouncing a basketball, and I can bounce it right here lightly. I can bounce it and move forward. I can make it bounce bigger. I can make it bounce less. And that is all done by my seat. So let's go the other direction real quick. And he's a little more complicated the other direction. I have to make, and this is partly because of me, I have to make sure my left hip doesn't get stuck backwards. And we'll talk about that in the next video about my seat position in the saddle. So bounce back up to the trot, and I'm going to, if I'm sloppy with my hip flexors, this is what it's going to look like. I'm bouncing all over the place because I'm sloppy with my hip flexors. My hip flexors have to stay loose, but my legs do not. My legs have an internal rotation, and my legs have some muscle tone to them. So if I want to bounce slower, I just time my bounce slower. If I want to bounce bigger, I time my bounce bigger, 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 bigger. Now he's not really warmed up to do anything, but I'm not really going forward yet. I'm just bouncing bigger. If I want to go forward, I bounce and let my seat go forward more, like that. No, stop. I know. Pay attention. I let my seat go more forward, and he goes more forward. And this is how you can half halt with your seat, and it doesn't look like you're doing anything, because you're controlling that bounce of the basketball, and you're controlling the speed of which your hip flexors are moving. And of course my core stays just as much engaged no matter what I'm doing. In fact, it might become more and less engaged depending on what I'm doing. But it's not like I'm just kind of creating the energy with my legs and then letting my seat channel it up in a different way. Okay, so that's a little bit how that hip flexor motion works. And that also allows you to get on different horses and be able to sit their trot. So he has a really big trot and a pretty bouncy trot. I have had horses that have had smaller trots, bouncier trots. I've had horses that have had more movement, but actually been easier to sit because they don't have so much movement through their back, just naturally, not because they're like holding their back. And of course, I've had horses that have been really easy to sit because they don't have much movement, right? So all those are the different scenarios. But if you can learn to follow that with your hip flexors and everything else is isometrically contracted to stay in place, then that's how you learn to sit the trot really beautifully. Of course, there's some movement in my knee and in my ankle also to absorb that, right? It's not like they're stationary. As soon as anything is 100% stationary, it's not going to work because you're on a moving object. The other thing I want to talk about, like with your hands, so you have to be able to separate your hands from the rest of your body. And oddly, you don't do that by like separating them. You actually do that by having a little weight in your elbow, and you're not gluing your elbow to your sides, but you do sort of have a, like a dowel that goes through this elbow and through this elbow and kind of stabilizes you here. And then you can move your arms around, but there's a stability. And sometimes I will put them like onto my side if I want to do something with my seat and I really want to stabilize my arm. This also, with this weight in the elbows, it allows me to carry my arms at whatever height I want to carry and also be riding toward the bit. So I'm not pulling back, right? If my elbows are here and they're weighted down, like there's a weight on them that's on a string that goes to the ground, then I can carry my hands in different heights depending on the horse, right? Or depending on what I want to do. I can also move it this way. It also keeps me from doing a lot of this and this, which actually shortens the horse and shuts their hind legs down. So I hope that's helpful a little bit on, it's a lot of pieces to put together, but I found that like once I started really having the core strength and even the isometric contraction down through the legs, but realizing that this needed to stay soft. Like a lot of people in their education will go from like too soft and then they'll start to learn how to stabilize themselves, but then their hip flexors get really tight and then they're not able to sit the trot like they'd want to. So that's a core piece. And another little add-on, I think I'll do that in the next video. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Thanks.